keep that booty booty. She keep that plump, yeah.
Hey y'all, I'm Ryan, and in this video I'll be going over another tutorial that showcases both audio reactivity and audio classification and particle simulations, all introduced by my node pack. So by the end of this video, you should be able to combine these things and make the particle simulations react to a song. That's what we're going to go over. Let's get into it straight away. All right, so I'll go over the basic stuff like loading the video and loading the model. I'll touch on that briefly, and you know, all this other stuff. But principally, I'm going to focus on the particle systems and the feature, the audio feature, and how we use them in combination. So let's start with the video. We are loading this video, and we are shrinking it down. And we do this for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that the smaller the image is, that the less memory the K-sampler will use. So we don't want to explode our computers. And then also we're using SD 1.5 because it's still the best for video at this time. And SD 1.5 was trained on 512 resolution. So the closer you are to that, depending on what you're doing, the better it will do. And then we can just upscale it towards the end. All right, so let's move on directly to the audio classification. And I just did a full tutorial specifically on audio classification or audio separation, and I will link that in the description, but I'll still cover it a bit here. So we could take the audio straight from our video, but I have chosen to load audio with this separate load audio node. And you just take the audio from any video helper suite node and plug that into this audio separator. So the audio separator is part of my node pack and will use this model to separate the song into its component parts: the drums, the vocals, and the bass, and the other. And the other is everything but the drums, the vocals, and the bass. We also get the feature pipe, which I'll explain in a second, but it's part of this feature system, which I have also done a full tutorial on. So I will link that in the description as well. But I'll still go over some of it. So before I do go on, I just want to point out that all my nodes have this question mark. When you click it, you'll be presented with documentation specific to the node. So I'll be glossing over some of this stuff, but only because I've already covered it or there's documentation at your fingertips. So give those a look over because they're very useful. All right, so we've separated the audio into, and we're going to use the drums specifically because it makes for an easy time doing audio reactivity. So I've taken the drums and then I've used these audio filters to isolate the kick drum. And we get the feature, and a feature is just information. And this flex feature system that I've introduced, all right, there's a dozen ways to do audio reactivity in ComfyUI, and this is another one that's really powerful. But what sets this apart from all the other ways that you can do this is that instead of audio here, we could take any feature that I've introduced, and those include depth, color, proximity, time, MIDI, brightness. There's a list of them. But we could just take any of those, like the motion from this video of this woman dancing, and we could use that instead of audio here if we wanted to. We would just delete this audio feature stuff and add a motion feature. So that's what sets these nodes apart. It's not just audio reactivity, it's anything reactivity. So I just want to hammer that home as much as I can because I think it's really cool, and I hope you do too. And I hope some people find this and are able to use it to make cool stuff. But for now, we're going to stick to audio. It is really useful anyways, audio. So this is what the feature looks like. We took the kick drum. So each of these spikes is a kick drum hit. And we're going to use that later to control the movement of the particles in the particle system. Before we move on to the right-hand side of the workflow, I'll just touch on this. We're loading a model. I'm using an LCM distilled model. LCM will allow us to do the sampling way faster because we can do it in far fewer sampling steps, like 4 steps instead of, and you get a high quality from those 4 steps. If you don't have an LCM distilled model, you can apply this LoRa, and it will make your model LCM compatible. I've got another Rao Finger LoRa here. I will link to him on Civit because it's great. His LoRas are always awesome. So I've written this little prompt. So I misspelled this. That's a bummer, but I bet it will still work. So I've used some keywords that work well with animate diff, like slime, bubbling, and flowing. It does really well with like water and smoke and fire and flowing stuff. So it's a layup when you toss it that word. All right, so we've got the video loaded and resized. We've got the audio feature, and we've got the model loaded. One last thing before we move on. You'll notice that I have created a mask that is the size of our input image. And you might have also noticed that I've got a black empty image here, and I'm making a mask from white. So it's an empty mask. Well, that is because the particle simulator. So the particle simulations need to occur somewhere, and that place is inside of a mask. So we've taken this empty mask and passed it to the particle emission mask, which is the main node for particle simulations. Now, I've already done a tutorial, a full tutorial specifically on the particle simulator. I will link that as well. So I'll link all 3 of those in the description, but I will explain what's going on here for those of you that don't want to go look at that one. All right, so we're passing in an empty mask because I don't want the particles to interact with the subject of the video. But if we wanted to, we could pass in a mask of the dancer in this video, and then we could make the particles bounce off of her instead of, but what the effect that I want is to have them wash over her and do a cool effect. But if we passed in a mask of her, and with this respect mask boundary on, they would bounce off of her. So that's a pretty cool thing. You can also set up simulation level settings here, like the total number of particles allowed to be alive at a time, how long they live for. You can add wind or gravity, some other basic stuff. All right, so we have the simulation space set up. Now we need to add particle emitters to shoot out particles into the space. And you can have as many as you want at a time. You just chain them together as I've done here. I've got 4. And they can all be going off at the same time, but that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted them to fire. I wanted to have different colors for different emitters, and I wanted them to start at different points in the song. So that's what I've done. This is a blue one, and the start frame, I set for 10 frames, which is probably where the first kick drum comes in, if I remember correctly. Then we have another one here that's red, and this comes in far later, 100 frames later, so it'll come in from the side. I wanted it to like push the other one out of the way. Actually, this one comes from the bottom. But if you watch the whole video that this produces, then another cloud would come in from the left and another from the right. So I have these other 2 particle emitters, and they're all chained together. All right, so we've got the simulation space set up. We've got the particle emitters set up. We're going to add one more thing to the simulation space, which are these static bodies. If you look closely at this video, you can see the white lines on the edges. That's all I've added here, these static bodies. They're impermeable membranes for the particles. So I didn't want any of the particles escaping after they were shot in here. At least I didn't want them going out the sides. So I added these static bodies. Okay. So we've got the whole simulation set up with all of our particles. Now let's make it audio reactive. So the way that we do that is by taking that feature, that audio feature, and passing it in to this particle modulation node. and we're doing speed because I wanted them to just move with the kick drum. Here.
Keep it juicy, juicy. I eat that lunch.
So I achieved that effect by, setting the speed of the particles to 1, or like basically not moving. But then when the feature comes in, when that kick drum hits, it will modulate them towards approaching this target speed, which I set very high. So we're doing speed here, but you can do other particle level modulation with features like color or size. And the same deal. You pass in the audio feature to either of those, and it will modulate them. Again, let me reiterate that it doesn't have to be audio. You can do anything with this. You can use anything as a driving feature. So we could make the particles move only when she moves. You see it, or make the particles move when there's a, it's hard to really describe all the different things you can do. All right, so we've got the particle simulator set up. We've got the audio reactivity going into the particle system. We've got the video loaded. We've got the models loaded, and the audio all separated out. So let's move on now that we have all that stuff set up. So I had mentioned that I made separate colors for some of the particle emitters, and that's because we're going to use those colors to mask them separately and give each color its own IP adapter. So that's all we're doing here, is we're taking the image produced by the particle emission mask node, and we're separating the red and the blue. The red and the blue. And the blue ones are getting this fractal paint looking thing, and then the red ones are getting this weird armor looking thing. I don't know. I didn't think it through very much. Okay, so before we move on from that, before doing this, I updated this tutorial to include this new depth shape modifier node that I added, just to see what it does. I'm not sure in this scenario. I'm not sure how it will affect the look, but you can see that it takes a mask, takes a depth map, and then adds the shape of the mask to the depth map. So this is our new depth map. It includes the particles. So if the particles were further apart, then this node would make each of them into a ball, but they're too close together for it to be able to tell, because we're just giving it the mask. I might add some other functionality or something where it knows much better what's a particle and what's not, but it's treating this massive thing as one piece. And so it made it a giant orb. So it'll be fun to see what that does. All right, we got everything set up. We got the pre-processing done. We got the IP adapters all set up. Here's the animate diff setup. So we've got our modified model with the IP adapter. We've got and everything. So now it's time to sample it. All right, and what we're doing here is making sure with this latent noise mask, and I use this all the time, but we're passing it the mask of the particles here, and I grew them a little bit. So we're only sampling where the particles are. We pass that masked latent to the first K sampler. I've set the denoise to 0.8 for whatever reason, so that should keep some of the original video. But as you can see, all the stuff we threw at the model made it pretty strong. So it's just kind of slimifying this poor lady. We could maybe try turning this way down and see. This will be cool to show you guys the effect that the denoise can have, because it's an important tool to have to allow you to get what you're trying to get out of a video. Let's hope it starts right there. Okay, hopefully by the time I'm done talking, it will at least get this intermediate result. So, but moving on for now, we've got the intermediate result from the first sampler, and it's usually pretty good at this point, but we can make it a lot better. So the way that we do that is by taking the latent output from this first sampler, upscaling it, because remember, at the beginning, we squished this video down way smaller. So now we're going to take it and grow it back again. And it doesn't matter that the resolution is much higher. I mentioned that the limitations of Stable Diffusion are the 512 by 512 training data, right? But when we turn the denoise down, we're giving less room for the sampler to be creative, for the model rather to be creative. So it doesn't matter all that much if the image is huge, like way bigger than 512 by 512. Because like you may have seen some of the cursed images of like super long people with extra limbs and stuff. That happens when you give the model too much creativity in on too big of an image. But since we've got the denoise so low here, that we probably will not have that problem. All it's really going to do is enhance what we got from the first sampler and add a bunch of detail. So this is a useful, simple little trick. All right, so, I mean, it's still pretty ridiculous. Like, you can't really tell that it's a person anymore, but I probably could have made that a little bit better in the prompt. Like, remind it that we're talking about a woman dancing here. I didn't actually say that in the prompt, so that probably would have been good. But it doesn't matter. You fiddle with this stuff, and you'll probably be able to get some better output than this. But here's what it looks like after the second sampler. So these are the same. See, it's just a heck of a lot more detailed in the second one, you know? Cool. I might refine this a little bit, but you know, just because this is coming out pretty cool. Hey, editing Ryan here, and you can tell time has passed because I'm wearing a hat. So it was bothering me a little bit how slimy the woman became after I made these changes. So I realized what it was. Not only was it that I didn't mention that this is a woman dancing in the prompt, which I added, but it's also because previously the only real information the model was getting about what was in the video we were modifying was the depth map. So it could tell from the contours of a woman's shape that it was a woman dancing. But I overwrote that. I slammed these particles into the depth map on top of it, overwriting it. So that's why it had no idea there was a woman there. So not only did I add that it's a woman dancing in the prompt, but I also added this line art control net. And this is not being influenced by the particles. It's the line art that's produced just from the input video. So that helped a lot. That because it gave it something to go on in the prompt, and also this control net without the particles in it. So here's the result, and I've got this is the old one that we just did. Here's the intermediate result. Here's the final result. So let's sync them up so you can see it together. So that's much better. So we got a big slimy orb, which is cool. That's great. But we still get a woman dancing. So this is the type of output I was looking for. So back to past Ryan. He's going to close out the video. Okay, thanks for watching, guys. Not so fast. This is ultra future Ryan, and note the hat. First, let me tell you, those other two guys, those other two Ryans, they're idiots, all right? Don't listen to them. Listen to me. Because I learned about differential diffusion from Andrea, I can't pronounce his last name. I'll link his channel in the description. But I learned from him about differential diffusion and growing the mask a bit with blur, which gives it a better, it gels better into the video. So I've added that. You'll see it in your workflow. Again, don't listen to those other Ryans. They're idiots. Don't subscribe to their channel. Subscribe to my channel. Okay. But maybe I'll refine it a little bit so I can post it to the Civit page. I don't know if I already told you, but there's plenty of other workflows there, other tutorials. I'll link those, at least those 3, in the description below. I really highly recommend looking at the Flex feature system. Once you get the hang of it, it's not too complicated, and it will give you a ton of power in ComfyUI. So I hope this was relatively clear and straightforward, and I hope I didn't leave anything out. If I did, let me know in the comments. If there's something else you want me to cover in a tutorial, I'm happy to do it. It doesn't even have to be related to my nodes, because a lot of my workflows are incidental. Like, they are just to show what my node pack can do. So show this to somebody who might think it's cool, and subscribe for more ComfyUI related stuff and other stuff. Okay, thanks.